Well, welcome, Greta, to the Men's Couch, a show about men's mental health and relationships and building an authentic identity. I'm so happy to have you here today. I have been wanting to talk about this issue for a very long time, but I wanted to have someone that's like more of an expert in on this topic to come on the show and really explain um, the dynamics behind ghosting and what is involved in ghosting and our relationships. As I mentioned earlier, I am a huge advocate of mental health and building relationships and community. Um, and just like experiencing this can be quite devastating. But yeah, it's I think it's important to talk about because I think a lot of people experience this, but they don't really have the necessarily like the language for the dynamics that are involved in ghosting, or they don't think that there are dynamics in ghosting. For me, I struggle a lot with internalizing ghosting.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Greta Perlmutter, and I am a certified post betrayal transformation coach. And I have the show Coping with Ghosting, the podcast. And my whole entire purpose is really to help people heal after betrayal, heartbreak, ghosting. And I do this using evidence based strategies so people can rebuild their confidence, trust, their self worth, and just feel really good again. And I'm so glad you are bringing this topic into the light because it is so important. And I want to make sure that your audience knows the way I define ghosting because I think we all kind of often have a different definition of it. And so the most important thing for today, I think, is that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. And so ghosting is the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation withdrawing from all communication. And that is what I got from the Oxford Dictionary. And I just want to be really clear that there's no mention of abuse in that. So, for example, ghosting is different than leaving an abusive situation without a goodbye. Like, if you need to do that, that's self protection. And it's
Yeah.
also different than disappearing after a communicated boundary has been violated.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between a boundary when it comes to dealing with a situation that's more of a toxic relationship, and
Mhm.
you know that it's healthy for you to end all forms of communication because you know, like, okay, if I communicate with this person, then it's going to send me back into a loop. So that's different than that versus someone suddenly just ending a relationship and you have no grounds or terms to even know what happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, that's happened to me a lot. I first experienced ghosting, I think, like, my junior year of high school. I became really close to a friend, and it was, like, over the summer. They, like, we were texting back and forth, and they stopped texting, like, all of a sudden, and I kept like, I would send messages saying, like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? You know, is everything okay?" And then I didn't get a response. And then I'll send like a few messages over time saying like, "I hope you're okay. You know, I wish you all the best." And because of that situation, I obviously didn't know like what was going on. I didn't get any communication of what was going on with that person. So I was left to kind of like internalize, okay, I must have done something wrong for that person to stop talking to me, or something was wrong with the friendship. So I didn't have anything to go off of because they didn't communicate anything. So that was my first true ghosting experience that I will like never ever forget. Of course, like, you know, time has moved on. I've moved on. I've since forgiven that person, but that's the first situation where I like define, okay, this is when I was ghosted because things were great in the friendship. You know, I really enjoyed this person, and from what I know, they really enjoyed the friendship, but it was just all of a sudden that they just stopped all communication, all texting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really hard. Thank you for sharing that with me. I think that one thing that's really misunderstood in our society is how incredibly painful being ghosted really is. It can take a huge toll on our mental health and our physical health as well, because this is not just something that happens in our mind. This is a nervous system event. And so it can really wreak havoc on everything like digestion. Your body might feel stress in your shoulders, and something that you want to really, when you heal, it's a holistic product process. It needs to address the entire body because it can cause sleep disruption. There's a whole slew of symptoms that come along with being ghosted. And actually, Dr. W. Silber has coined the term post betrayal syndrome. And that's what that really is after you've been betrayed, your body just wreaks havoc on it. And so it's a very, this is like everything you're feeling, everything you're describing, just like the confusion, the frustration, like the anxiety, the feelings of, I don't know, not even feeling like you can trust anyone anymore. Like these are all normal things that come after we're betrayed or ghosted in a relationship.
Yeah, I've experienced like, after that, I've experienced grief like I kind of never experienced before. It
Yeah,
was more of like, okay, it's more of like ambiguous because I don't have anything, like the grief isn't really solved.
right.
I didn't solve what happened. I don't know what happened. So it was more of like this feeling that I've held, and I just like it was going into like my senior year. So of course like there was that like added stress. So I think like all in all, it was like a time of grief because, like I said, before, I'm a person that like I value my relationships dearly, and they mean a lot to me. So I think like a lot of the grief was surrounding. I was like, okay, I hope this person's okay, and just a grief of not knowing what happened. But yeah, I think like you said, we kind of minimize like the impact of ghosting, whether it's like a romantic relationship or a friendship, kind of like minimize that impact because again, we don't know what happened. So we feel like okay, they're gone out of my life. It shouldn't affect me, but if you've built a level of connection with someone that they become a part of your life for a number of years or a season, and for that to kind of like abruptly shift can be seen as like traumatic because you're not, and I use that term lightly, but it could be seen as so sudden, and you're become so accustomed to a way of connecting, and when that like that level of like safety is not there, then you're like, okay, my world is not safe, and then that goes into the piece of like, how do I trust people again? So it's a whole process. Yeah, it was like a definite like heavy thing. I think like the things that got me through it is just my therapist, and also like involving myself in other activities like marching band at the time because I was in high school. So I think that was helpful, but also like really understanding how it really brought to me like how I internalize a lot, and I needed to stop internalizing the situation.
Well, right. And I think, we can't help the way we feel, right? We are going to have these emotions come up, and they're coming up because of what we're thinking. And we can't really help what pops into our heads. However, we can control what we choose to think next. We can create a space and realize the way we're talking to ourselves in our minds, and then maybe just, okay, today I'm going to be a little bit kinder to myself, and I'm going to, like, it's called reframing. You're familiar with reframes?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I used to blame myself. Well, you were talking about this before. You blamed
yeah,
yourself for being ghosted. So I would blame myself. I would say something like, "He hates me. That's why I was ghosted." The ghost didn't think I was worthy of an explanation. The ghost didn't care about me at all. It was just a fake relationship. And what I realized is that when I started hearing myself saying all this negative self talk, I could pause and say, "Hey, wait, is that true?
yeah,
Do I know this? Actually, no." The person left and they didn't have the decency, the dignity, the respect to even give me any explanation. And here I, filling in the blanks with the worst case scenarios about myself. How can
yeah,
I be kinder to myself? And so I've, over the years, changed that internal monologue, and I've changed it to, I don't know why I was ghosted. I don't. I mean, this person, even if they came back and told me why today, I'm not sure I would actually believe them. don't know why I was ghosted. I'm not a mind reader. So I don't know why I was ghosted. And I radically accept that. It's it's
Mhm.
it's hard to acknowledge, but I don't know why. So I'm not going to make up a story about myself because somebody else did something that reflects their values, that reflects their inability to
Yeah.
communicate or their choice not to communicate. Really. There's two types of ghosts. And there's an accidental ghost and there's an intentional ghost.
Yeah.
So, whoever ghosts, the reason why they're doing it is because they're either unable or unwilling to end a relationship. Unable is the accidental ghost that maybe lost their phone in the toilet, but there's also the ghost that's doing this on purpose. And maybe they're doing it because they don't have very good social skills. Maybe they're doing it because they're afraid of emotions. They're afraid to see how you'll respond to them ending the relationship you have. Maybe they just don't have the words. I was a ghost once, and I have to say it was a friendship ghosting. So I was friends with a guy who I could tell he wanted more than just to be my friend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it felt really uncomfortable for me. I was like, I don't want to date this guy, but I want to be his friend. But it's just like getting to the verge. It's like he's not doing anything wrong. He's a nice
Yeah.
person, but I just feel uncomfortable when I'm with him because I can tell he wants more. And I talked to my girlfriend about it. We're like, what do I do? I said, what do I do? And she's like, just ghost him. And I'm like, I don't want to ghost him. But I also didn't know at the time, I didn't know how to have a conversation with him that could be polite and also say, I'm done with this. So I ghosted him and I felt really bad. For years, I felt so bad. I finally went back and I told him, I'm so sorry that I did this. I wasn't in a good place back then. And I wasn't because I literally didn't have the communication skills at the time to have a mature conversation with him. I could have said anything. I could have said, I really value our friendship. I feel like this isn't the right fit for me right now. I'm going to move on. I could have been so polite. I didn't owe him a huge, long explanation about why I wasn't attracted to him, but I could have done it in a nice way. And I didn't. And I was a ghost. And if anybody's listening and they feel bad because they've ghosted, have compassion for yourself. Be kind to yourself in all scenarios. Everybody here, I just encourage you to be a little bit nicer to yourself today and to really pay attention to the way you're thinking and what you're hearing your mind say to yourself and to start making it a safer, nicer home so that you can feel more relaxed every day.
Mhm. Yeah, that brings up a lot of points because I've never this is gonna sound, like, a little crazy, but I've never, been ghosted by any of my female friends. I've always been ghosted by, a male friend, and I've always, wondered in the back of my head is, do men struggle with more of, those communication skills that you talked about? And also, are men more, avoidant when it comes to, communication? Because I've never, in all my, year experiences of ghosting, it's always been a guy that has ghosted me. It hasn't never been a female. Not to say that never happens, but just in my experience. So I'm wondering if just when it comes to valuing communication in relationships, are women more socialized to have the skills, or is it just happenstance or coincidence? And so that's something that I've always thought of. And I've also wondered if people that have more, because I like learning about attachment theory, if people that have more of an avoidant attachment ghost, or people that are fearful of avoidant ghosts, because I've always wondered that as well. But yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing up these great points. Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. So, people with more avoidant attachment and avoidant attachment style are the most likely to ghost. And they're the most likely to ghost because they don't know how to deal with their emotions. It's just facing these emotions, having these confrontational conversations. This is something that goes all the way back to their childhood. And they want to avoid these emotions. And I believe men are more likely to be avoidant. And you're right. This is going back to societal programming. So in general, boys are tend and this is not across the board, but they're usually raised by parents who are saying, or caregivers who are saying, don't cry, just man up. And so they're often taught to suppress their emotions and to kind of sweep them under the rug. Whereas girls, if they're little girls, if they're crying, oh, come here, honey. Are you okay? Let's talk about it. Right. And so they're socialized in different ways. And women are taught to be more emotionally attuned with one another, that kind of thing. So, yes, in general, I do believe that I'm not surprised at all that it's been the males. And then I also think that in terms of the attachment styles, secure is unlikely to ghost because they've grown up in a place where emotions are communicated in really healthy ways.
Just to add to that, I think, if you become more of a securely attached person, or you grew up in secure attachment, I think, like, my based on my perspective, that you're gonna feel safe in open communication. If you have, like, an anxious or avoidant attachment, then you might see communication, open, honest, vulnerable communication, as rejection. So if someone is avoidantly attached or anxiously attached, and they're, need to communicate something in a relationship that has a potential for it to become deeper, then they might withhold that, and they might see that as like, okay, this is too risky, and then that might lead them to more of like ghosting, because they feel like if they were to be open and honest, and that could cost them the relationship. So they might instead just ghost, because that's like avoiding the anxiety of even having a conversation. But yeah.
I am the first to tell you I'm not an attachment expert, but I do study
Yeah.
attachment a lot and I'm writing sections on it in my book. So, those who have anxious attachment styles are unlikely to ghost, but because they're people pleasers, they may be very concerned about hurting somebody's feeling during a relationship ending conversation. And so they may ghost because of that. So that I think that's a really good example of me when I was a ghost. I was so afraid to hurt this person's feelings that like I just felt like he was going to ask me all the reasons why I was not going to be his friend anymore and I was going to have to list them out one by one, which I totally wasn't obligated to do and I didn't have to do
Yeah.
that. But at the time I felt like I would have, and so I was really just too scared to end it with him in person. And so that I think was my anxious attachment coming through. And then somebody else with anxious attachment might also, they might ghost as like a form of protest behavior. So what I mean by that is they might actually say like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to talk to him and I'm going to see if he comes to get me back. Like if he
Okay.
actually comes back." And so they want to see if the goes excuse me, if the person is going to make an effort to reconnect. So that is what would happen in that scenario. So there's also fearful avoidant, and they are likely to ghost because they feel suffocated in the relationship or they fear that they're going to be abandoned. Like, for example, they may feel that communicating their emotions is just too overwhelming and they freeze and they abruptly leave. So I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
sorry.
it's a whole spectrum.
Yeah, I think that the fearful avoidant makes a lot of sense,
Hmm.
because especially for people that may be more anxious in terms of communication and fearing rejection from communication, they might fear that their friend or partner might reject them if they were to be honest about their relationship. So if it's like a conflict thing, they might feel that, okay, I'm just going to ghost instead of having this open and honest conversation. I think that, like even in our minds, that might seem a little bit more easier, especially like if you're overwhelmed by fear
Hmm.
and you don't know how to handle anxiety, in terms of anxiety that happens inside of a relationship. I think that if we don't have those skills, then I think it's like, yeah, the fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. But I don't think fawn is like in this situation. But freeze is like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I just, but it makes like a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to friendship ghosting, I have a question. because I'm a huge person, like, when it comes to friendship. I like talking about friendship, and we talk about, like, ghosting in dating and romantic relationships, but what have you learned about ghosting when it comes to developing friendships or when it comes to building community? For me specifically, like, I kinda, like, deem myself as someone that loves to build community. What have you, like, experienced or learned about that?
Well, I think friendship ghosting is really, really, really hard because it's not just about you and this friend. Sometimes it is, but it's also about the greater community. And so if there's a rift in the friend group, it's going to make it awkward for everybody. And people even might choose sides. You know what I'm saying? It can be really stressful on a big level because you don't feel like you can go to one friend who's still friends with the ghost and you might not want to tell them. Like it just creates drama, if you
Yeah.
will. Yeah. And so it's very, very challenging. And I think one thing that I would recommend for people who have been ghosted in friendship and it's their mutuals, right? They're all these mutual friends, is first of all, don't throw the ghost under the bus. Because if your
Yeah.
friends are still friends with the ghost, just I think it's disrespectful to talk poorly about the ghost. I know that sounds wild, but the thing is oftentimes people ghost because they're really struggling. I mean, clearly at a baseline, there's if they're still friends with
Yeah.
other people and they haven't when their phone is not in that toilet and they're doing this intentionally, then this person at a baseline is like they're lacking basic communication skills. They're lacking
Yeah.
social skills. And so that's kind of really hard for them. I know it takes a lot to get to a place where we're having empathy for the ghost, but really, I don't think it's helpful to burn bridges in your friendship group. And you can maybe say, like, have a canned statement, have something that you can just tell people if they ask, like, hey, have you been talking to John recently? I don't see you guys together and hanging out very much. You could say, like, we're not as close anymore as we once used to be. You don't have to say, like, oh, he's just stopped talking to me abruptly for no
Yeah.
reason. What a jerk. You know what I'm saying? So I would just have something like that's very respectful, like ready to to tell other people. Unless you're super close with somebody else and, in that case it's a little different, but I just say have compassion. If they're still in your circle, these people are still friends with them, like, just show some respect.
Yeah, I think too, at least in my experience, when ghosting happened, usually in the months or weeks prior, they showed signs of struggling with their mental health.
Yeah,
And I think that's like so important when it comes to the compassion piece, the compassion and empathy piece,
yeah,
that this person is obviously struggling. Not that that excuses a lack of communication, but we can understand that they're in a, like, in this state, they have limited ability to communicate openly than they would probably if they're more healthy or more at their baseline. Or if their default baseline is that, then they're, like you said, they're definitely really struggling. And for me, in my experience, I definitely was able to develop empathy and compassion for people that did ghost me, because usually, like, in those cases, I would see signs of them, like, withdrawing beforehand, or like just like their language and communication, which like would shift to a more like anxious or depressed state. And so, like, I kind of understood that, okay, now that this happened, now that the ghosting happened, maybe there may have been mental health involved. It doesn't, like, make it hurt less, but it helps you to understand that this person, like, when we're in the midst of hurt, it's so easy to say, okay, this person is just terrible. They don't know, like, anything about relationships. But I think dealing with, like, the betrayal trauma, what helps, at least in my experience, is to have a more nuanced narrative of what happened, because it's not so black and white as they don't like you or they hate you. It's more of things that are very, like, complicated and messy for them, and they're not really handling it in the best way possible.
right.
And that, like, goes to, like, my next question of, can someone still care about you and, like, choose to ghost. So can we like hold two truths of this person cared a lot about me and they still made this decision?
Absolutely. Yeah, both things can be true at once. They can care about you, they can even love you, and yet they can ghost. And really, again, this all goes back to this is a them problem, not a you problem. This is their inability or choice not to communicate that they need to end this relationship or they want to end this relationship. Actually, an accidental ghosting sometimes they didn't even intend to end it. But yes, they can definitely care about you. And I cared about the guy I ghosted. I cared about his feelings. And I think this is kind of like I felt bad for ghosting, but I knew that I would feel really bad for telling him all the reasons why I didn't want to date him, but at the same time, it was like I just didn't know how to gloss over it at that time in my life. Like I didn't know that I didn't owe him this lengthy explanation. So anyway, I think it really just goes back to people can care and they can ghost. And I know that I still care about the ghosts too. I want the best for them as well. So it goes both
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you said you're a trauma expert or betrayal trauma expert? I forgot what you said.
I'm a certified post betrayal transformation coach.
Okay, so I have like so many questions about the healing process of
Yeah.
ghosting.
Yeah.
And I know like a lot of listeners have questions about, okay, well, how do I like, because I think like people have a goal of just forgetting the ghost and forgetting that, okay, this, especially like for guys, we like to like compartmentalize things and be like, okay, this never mattered, or this is just like, it is what it is. But there's so many, like I for one, like, I knew that there were, like, different stages of healing at that time because I, like, went through, like, so many different emotions and so many different stages, of course, I went through, like, the grief process, then I went through, like, the anger of, like, "Oh my goodness, how could this person choose this method of communication?" And then you also go through because at the time we went to the same high school, so I was in high school at the time. So I was trying to like sort of ask around about like, okay, what's going on with this person? So you kind of go through that process, and it's messy, but you learn a lot through that process. And I guess like a question I have is what might the healing process look like, or what might be like a framework for people that may have been ghosted?
Well, it's a really big answer. And I think healing, first of all, know that it's not linear. So some days you're going to have good days, some days it's going to be really hard. It's grief. And so one thing that I think is important that you touched on lightly is that some people just want to forget.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people maybe who are listening are on here because they want closure. They're listening to this for closure. And the thing is that I used to do all this content around closure, but I think closure is the wrong word because it kind of implies that like done with this chapter of my life, going to move on.
Yeah.
And really this person was an important part of your life. They were part of your high school, growing up, your childhood. That's important. So, what I would say is that person was there for a season and a reason. They played an important role in your life, and they'll always live in your memories and your heart. You're not going to forget. And so, the goal then doesn't become to forget and get rid of them in your mind, but the goal becomes to grow around your grief or to kind of like understand what that relationship meant to you, how you grew from it, how you can feel grateful for what it gave you at the time. And now, how can I make meaning of this experience? How can I grow from being ghosted? And this
Yeah.
is not just like again, it's not just mental, but it's a holistic process of healing. And so, for me, it's kind of like important that you reflect like when I'm coaching, I have my clients reflect on the relationship, okay? What did this person teach you? How is this person a teacher in your life? Right?
Mhm.
What did you like about the relationship? What did you dislike about the relationship? What do you want to change moving forward? And so healing is really about facing these emotions, that everything you're going through head on afterward instead of pushing it down. Like a lot of people, they get stuck. They say, oh, well, this is really painful. I don't want to think about this. And every time they do, they they go for a drink or they eat some they binge eat or like for me, I did that. Like every time I thought about the ghost, I'd be like, oh, I need some ice cream right now. This is too stressful. My thoughts were spiraling, right?
Yeah.
But I think what is important is that you have to kind of feel these feelings and allow them to bubble up and mindfully process them and work through them and work through the feelings that are held within the body and move through them too. And then say, okay, well, how can I use this to help my life? How can I level up? How can I start setting boundaries and choosing people who are choosing me? Because that was at least one
Yeah.
thing I used to do, where I
That's
was just trying to, well, this person doesn't like me. I'm going to do everything I can to get them to like me. But
yeah,
now I'm
that's
at a
oh my
point
goodness.
where, right? Like being a people
Oh my goodness,
pleaser,
it's
like,
such like a you're touching
yeah,
on, like, you're touching on a lot for me because so I like, another thing too is, like, like the idea of just, like, integrating this experience into your whole journey of just of life, and also being able to set limits on the access that you allow to certain people that may not have that level of respect or they haven't, like, earned that level of access. So, like, if you like, for me as someone that, like, I just I love people, like, building community, but, like, if some people have access to you that may not be, like, respecting your boundaries or may not have see the relationship the same way, then it might be, like, easier to get hurt if things like ghosting happen or things happen, but, not just saying, like, the hurt is your fault, but it's, are we mindfully, giving access to people that shouldn't have access to us. And that's something that I struggle with like a lot and I still struggle with is who has access to you. And some people shouldn't. And they're like I think at that time I like focus so heavily on this relationship that it like consumes a lot of your mind and I didn't allow my social world to expand and grow. So I think especially, like, if that happens, if ghosting happens, it's so easy to retract into yourself, but really, that experience really showed me that I needed to allow my social world to grow, and that involves, reestablishing trust again in people and opening yourself to people because and of course that takes time, but if you go about friendship as like an all or nothing thing, or like if you have like a scarcity mindset, there's 8 billion people in the world. So like if you have like a scarcity mindset, it might make the experience of ghosting a little bit more heavy because you're not like relying on your social support outside of that relationship. So I think that's another thing, like relying on the people that are more secure and that you have more securely attached relationships with so that can help be like a resilience factor.
yes, exactly.
So that was a lot. I just had a lot to say, but
I'm glad you said that. I mean, trust is a huge thing. And that's also part of what I teach is how to heal and how to trust again. Because I was in high school, I was a junior. I think I was a junior. I'm pretty sure I was. And my friend all of a sudden stopped talking to me too. So I totally,
yeah.
I'm feeling you on your high school story. I went to college and I was like, not going to trust any girls here because of what had happened. I was so afraid. Eventually, I did move forward and I began to trust, but it took a really long time for me to do it. And you don't have to trust a person when you first hang out with them. It's something that's built over time. You're watching for them to have consistent actions. Do their words align with their actions? Do their actions align with their words? Like, are they who they say they are? It sometimes can take, especially in friendship, at least like 50 to 100 hours of getting to know somebody and hanging out with them in real life to really know who they are. And so I think like slowly opening up is a healthy way to go about it. You don't want to dump your traumas to somebody on the first time you're hanging out with them, but like slowly talk to them about the things that are closer to your heart as you build up the foundations of your friendship. You again, you don't have to trust people to hang out with them, But I do think it's important that you know there are trustworthy people out there who are not going to ghost you. And also, having a conversation with people about ghosting can really give you insights onto their
Mhm.
perspective of it. I've heard so many people say, well, they promised me they would never ghost me and then they ghosted me.
Yeah.
So there is a disconnect there. And so it's more like it's like in the back of my mind, I'm going to be perfectly honest. In the back of my mind, sometimes I just think like there is a possibility that people will ghost me, and that is scary. But ultimately, I know now that they will have served a purpose in my life, season, reason, and I can be grateful for the time I spent with them. I can kind of see it like if you go to an island, you have a really good time at that island, you have so much fun, and you look back and you're like, yeah, I had a great time at that island. I'm not on that island currently, but it was a good time. Like, I got so
Yeah.
many gifts from all the people that ghosted me. There were weird hidden silver linings. Like, one of the guys took me on a ski trip as an adult, and I was able to relearn how to ski as an adult because I had done it once when I was a kid. But he got me a ski lesson. Like, I'm glad I did that. And he ghosted me, but I'm still glad that I had that experience, right? So, like, it's kind of just about a reframing of how they fit into your mental model, into your mind. And then additionally, like, I know that if somebody ghosts me today, I'll be okay because I don't need their approval, their validation to feel good about who I am because I feel good about who I am without them. I don't need them. I don't need that.
Yeah.
And so it's nice. I think we all need to be seen, heard, understood, loved, all of that. I'm not saying don't go into community, but I'm saying what I'm trying to get across is that have use being ghosted as the catalyst for positive change, as a springboard to be like, hey, I realized that my self-esteem took a nosedive when I was
Oh,
ghosted.
goodness,
So
yeah.
I'm going to do everything in my power to give myself the best, highest self esteem. I'm going to feel so confident, so good about myself. So if this happens again, it's not going to rattle my world. Yeah, I'll be sad because I'm a human and I experience sadness and the range of emotions, and losing somebody is really, really, really hard. But I know that it's not going to affect the way I feel about myself, and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through it.
Yeah, I think too is knowing that you can grow from this experience and you don't have like your social world is not limited to that situation. You might view your current or future relationships in a framework through the ghosting experience. You might say like, well, it's just not like worth it to try again. And I was definitely in that state for a little bit, but also, I at the time, I wasn't necessarily expanding my social world to meet more secure people. So, me being more underdeveloped in my like own attachment, I may have been in a season where I may have attracted people that were also sort of more like underdeveloped in their own attachment or less secure. If you meet more secure friends and people to hang out with, then you're going to feel more secure about the stability of the friendship because you know that they value communication. A good example is my current roommate and also a co-host of Men's Couch. It's like going into the friendship. Well, first, personally, because of coming from a season of ghosting, experiencing ghosting, I was not open to the friendship. And he was like, I value open communication. And he's also like way more extroverted than me. So at the time, I was a freshman in college, coming from a season of ghosting and betrayal in high school. So I was so like closed off to having more friendships. And then like this guy just comes along and just like, well, I want to be your roommate. And I was like, why do you want to be my roommate? Like we're complete opposites. So I think like that experience sort of shifted my perspective on friendship and what friendship could be because I didn't experience that before. So I think we only know and go off of our experience. So if our experience is more of like being ghosted or maybe just like growing up in a social environment that wasn't like as accepting, then we might be more closed off to people that are more secure than us. And then sometimes like we might even be tempted to ghost them because we haven't experienced a more secure friendship or relationship. So we shouldn't do that. But yeah, I think that was a defining experience in my life that really changed the way how I see the potential of friendship and understanding that okay, not everybody is going to ghost you. So I think those corrective relationships are super important to kind of change the trajectory of being betrayed by ghosting.
Thank you for sharing that. So
Yeah.
interesting. I'm really glad that you were able to trust again.
Yeah. I guess my last question before we close off is there is there a thing where like in the modern age, younger generations, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, are more likely to ghost, or is it just more pronounced, or is it more like I don't know how to say that because I truly think that ghosting always existed, but maybe it's not wasn't as pronounced back then.
Yeah. So, absolutely. So, the most people who ghost are Gen Z and millennial. And then with a close Gen X, and then the people who are least likely to ghost are boomers.
That's interesting.
So, and this is let me cite my if I'm gonna talk about that, I guess I gotta cite it. Okay, so this is from Indeeding, and this is a 2025 number barn study from the USA. And this was so that's what that's from. But I would say this is probably across the board gonna be similar in friendship too, maybe, probably. I haven't really I can't think of a specific study on cross generational friendship ghosting that I'm aware of at this time in this moment right now. But I bet if I looked
Yeah,
it up, I could find some.
yeah,
Anyway, I would say that right now we're in an age of it's easy to connect and it's just as easy to disconnect, right? You can
yeah,
really quickly start talking to somebody and just as easily block them and delete them from your entire life. And so I think that whole technological aspect of it is something that Gen Z, millennial, we're going to be doing it more than the boomers.
yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense that it would be people who are more digitally native are going to participate in that specific trend more.
That makes sense. I just like hope it does is not the norm or default, but like I understand that we live in like a social climate, or given the technology advances that might come to play because of the instant messaging, and we have like ways of just blocking or instantly blocking someone, so that might
Yeah.
be a factor.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, I think like ghosting overall, I think in my experience, like really showed me like how much I value relationships, and that it's also like I need to make space in my heart to value relationships as deeply as I do. Like that, like for so long, I felt like, okay, is there something wrong with me valuing the people in my life this deeply if they're just going to ghost? But like, absolutely not. Like, I don't believe that anymore. Like, I believe that we
Yeah.
should like there's a healthy value where we can have people in our life and value them, and obviously not like hold on to them like so tightly that that becomes our security, but we can also be like become attached to people in a healthy way that if they do disappear suddenly, then grief is normal, and normalizing that is like so important because we're human. And it's no different. I think it's like obviously I think it's a bit harder for men because we may have some of us may have been socialized to compartmentalize relationships, but like across the board, I think ghosting can show you in terms of like healing. When you're healing from ghosting, I think it can show you like a part of your personality that is beautiful. Like this desire to want to connect with people is awesome. And when you're healing from ghosting, that's something to honor and to use in the next relationship or the next group of people that you come to know.
Exactly. You were the one that stayed. You were the one that tried. You were the one that attempted to communicate. That's good. Give yourself credit for being the person that was there consistently throughout the whole relationship. Celebrate what you did good in that friendship and honor yourself for it.
And also, like, it's okay to not like I'm a person that I don't like uncertainty, and I like always like to have like an explanation for something. But I I think just that experience just showed me that like sometimes life there's going to be a big question mark that you're not going to be able to answer. We can have an idea of what may have
Right.
happened, but we don't. we don't know, and it's okay. Like the best thing that, and also like also too, don't feel guilty that it happened. Don't feel like you drove that person away. Understand that you may have had an impact on their life that you don't know the impact,
Right.
and that's also important too.
Right, exactly. I've seen a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, I really loved that person and the love that I felt was overwhelming and it scared me. And I loved them so much and I didn't know how I don't even think they deserved me. I don't even feel like I was good enough for them, so I ghosted." What?
Like
And
that,
like, you really have no idea. So do not blame yourself. Exactly what you said. This isn't your fault. Yes, your behavior has an influence on people, but ultimately it's the ghost's choice or inability to not be in this relationship. And so that's on them. Their behavior is their responsibility.
yeah. And also, I just want to say, like, before we close off, like, thank you so much for making a podcast on this. I think
Yeah.
it's so needed now because of the environment that technology can create and what people seem to default to sometimes to ghosting. I think it seems to be happening to like a lot of people, but I think we just don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to have like a space to heal from it without closing off. So I think it's so important to treat ghosting just like anything else that is just a valid emotional experience too. Like it's very valid that like feel grief about ghosting. I think even sometimes more grief than other things because in some cases it's ambiguous. So I think it's important to have that space because, we need to know how to navigate this because it is going to happen to some people because of the age that we live in. And I think we need to like know how to navigate that and integrate that experience into our journey so that we can become like healthier versions of ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming on. I think we have more to talk about ghosting, and I hope to have you back on.
Thank you. Yes. And listeners, viewers, you can find me at copingwithghosting.com. I'm at Coping with Ghosting on social media. And I'm hoping to finish my book, the one that I've been looking at during our conversation, because it just had some stats in it that I needed to pull. That's called Coping with Ghosting. And it's going to be the essential guide to healing in dating and love. And so that's my first one. And then I hope to do one on friendship as well.
Oh, wait, so you're writing a book
I'm
currently.
writing a book.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. That's nice. That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, again, thank you so much. And this episode, like, I'm glad that I talked about this experience, and I hope for the listeners that this also resonates. That you know that you're not alone. That this experience is your emotional experience is completely normal and valid. Yeah. As always, feel free to follow and subscribe to Coping with Ghosting and Men's Couch.
Thank you.